Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. And today we are joined by a very special guest, Tolbert McCarroll, who has written a new book called A Winter Walk, and it's illustrated by Dorothy Beebe and published by Crossroad Books. And I guess I'm allowed to call your brother Toby, am I not?
Well, I certainly hope you do.
Okay, well, welcome. It's nice of you to come by.
Thanks, Jim.
One of the things that I discovered in looking at the notes on the author that you are better known as Brother Toby.
That's right.
And that you've written several books. I guess this is either number 9 or 10.
This is number 9, I think.
Number 9. And among those, notes from the Song of Life and Child Song, Monk Song, I guess, are either the ones that you like the best or your publisher does. I don't know.
Right. So.
And more importantly, perhaps you're a founding member of the Star-Crossed community, which is described as a small lay community in the monastic tradition. Can you shed any light on those words?
Well, yeah, a little bit. We started out in San Francisco in the 70s as part of the, kind of circus of human potential that was going on at that time.
I see.
But our interest was more in the spiritual, kind of trying to connect the psychological and the spiritual, and Eastern and Western spirituality. And we all had Catholic roots, and so at some point it just seemed like we were drifting toward a monastic kind of life and a quiet sort of life, which San Francisco was not in 1976.
No, it wasn't.
And
I can attest.
Yeah, and so we decided to follow the rule of St. Benedict, and we made a very close relation with a Trappist monastery up in Vina. And so we moved out to Annapolis, which is in the northwest corner of Sonoma County, and bought an old farm there that had more or less been abandoned, and started our life. But the kind of the uniqueness is, we've raised various things, Christmas trees, we raise olives now and things like that. But I
love the olives part of it.
Yeah, there's nothing like the peace of to be quite honest, sometimes instead of Vespers, we go sit out in the summer evening in the olive field and watch the birds and have a glass of wine. So
that's all very biblical.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but we also have always raised children, and we brought some children with us who were more abandoned from San Francisco, and so working with children has always been a part of our life. And then in the 80s, the AIDS epidemic came on, and we opened our doors to children with AIDS who were, at that time, there was so much panic that people were, leaving them in the hospital.
Yes,
yes. So
they were afraid to touch people with AIDS.
Yeah, and it was a bad time, you remember, yeah. And so then we adopted some, and lo and behold, they turned out not to have AIDS as the testing got better. So we have several children that are growing up. I'm 76-year-old, and I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old adopted son and daughter. That's a challenge, I'll tell you.
That'll keep you busy.
That's right. Either puts me in the grave or keeps me alive. I haven't made up my mind. And then we have about 120 kids we care for who are AIDS orphans in Africa. And so, in addition to the olives, that's kind of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get to the book. The book is called A Winter Walk, and you say at one point, it is in the cycles of the year that many of us find our spiritual paths, not in the doctrines or the dogmas of religious institutions. And this book focuses on that time of the year that we call winter, and you think that it can be a unique time of reflection and nourishment.
Well, I certainly think so. I feel like the old the Celts and a number of religious traditions have talked about having thin places, by which they mean their times or particular places where the difference between what's sacred and what's very ordinary evaporates. And I think winter in the cycle of the seasons is such a thin place. We've just gone through, the beautiful letting go time of like October. I think it was Herb Cain that says heaven was October in San Francisco. So we've just gone through that. Now we're getting, at least around here, we're seeing bare limbs and stronger winds, and you can say, oh shoot, what happened to all the prettiness?
I think at one point you described that kind of like a quieting of nature, a slowing down.
That's correct. I mean, I think that it gets to the essentials. I mean, this is the essential part of the tree. You're not being distracted by the glitz, and I think that's what's available for us in winter. I don't believe that society necessarily cooperates in finding that kind of time. I mean, we often the December, for example, becomes a time of checking off items on a list or something, to do stuff. And
well, as you also point out, it's a time of all kinds of celebrations, which puts us in a situation of a lot of frenzied activity.
That's correct. I think if we could let our celebrations be like the bare trees and get back to the essence of them, I think that they're beautiful. I mean, the winter celebrations, not only of my own Christian tradition, but also of many other traditions.
Well, hold off on that because it's time for us to take a break. We'll talk about that and other things when we come back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Conversations on the Coast. Our guest today, Tolbert McCarroll, better known as Brother Toby. His book, A Winter Walk, with illustrations by Dorothy Beebe, and it's published by Crossroad Books. Brother, what about the illustrations? I find them quite striking.
Yes, well, Dorothy is a West Sonoma County artist, and I've known her for a long time, and it's very, very, very interesting process that happened here. Dorothy actually could not just read my stuff and illustrate it. She had to find something in her own experience and illustrate that, and that has more or less been my experience in that people read something in this book. There are 32 relatively short sections, and some people read one a day and that sort of thing, and then it triggers something in their own experience. And so that becomes, I've had a couple of phenomenal things where you may remember one part of the book has to do right before right after the Second World War started, in which all the religious services were canceled because of fear, and I was laying in bed and I heard the sound of this train, and so what happens is I go to give a reading. A fellow comes up with this big picture that he had taken of this train station that I had been talking about, and then he said, I'm going to start telling my grandchildren about how I felt on that day.
Wow!
And I thought, this is exactly it. Let's start this going.
Yes, one of the things that you take on and bravely, I would say, is the meaning of Christmas, or the Christmas story. You write, forget about the monasteries for a moment. The fundamental assumption of the Christmas story, as well as of Ramadan, Bodhi Day, or Hanukkah, is that the divine and the human can touch.
Right.
Now, that's a wonderful idea because it does span across all kinds of religious belief, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, and I think that is where we share, even when we don't share beliefs, which will always be the case. We can share experience, and I think that the experiences are extremely rich. And I think that this touching of the human, the very human, and the divine, is what it's all about. And I mean, that's where the hope comes from in the middle of a bleak winter.
Well, as you go on in that particular part of the book, you exhibit one of the great virtues that you have in this book, and that is that you immediately get into the practical. You write, the touching of heaven and earth at the birth of Jesus continues in the moment between two old friends in a coffee shop or in a family singing songs around a fireplace. Those of us raised in a Christian culture must reject the concept that Christmas is only memorializing what happened 2,000 years ago. We have the opportunity to experience, one might say the obligation, to experience the same wonder in the moment we are living now.
Yes, I think that's very true, and that's what we remember. When that happens, which I really think ought to happen more than rushing through a department store to get a gift for somebody who doesn't need it, that when those touchings happen, those are the things we really remember. Those are the things that enrich our lives, and those are the things we can share with those who come after us.
This book, in a way, is a perfect gift for that time of the year, and people who are listening into the program this morning can hear more from you as you read from the book, answer questions, and sign books at Old St. Mary's Church on California and Grand. My understanding, you're going to be there at high noon. You'll be in the auditorium, so people can look forward to that. But don't tune out now. Stay tuned.
Okay.
The spirit of the book is really something that I think you say at one point, seeking moments of silence and rest. Again, that goes back to the business of that we're so frenzied at this time of the year.
Yes, I think, I don't know. You know, we live in a time where if the temperature gets cold, we turn up the thermostat. If we want strawberries for a cheesecake, we go down to the supermarket and get some from Chile. You know, and in the process, we kind of miss something, and that there really are changes taking place. And I think it's awfully important to find that quiet. It's something I think all of our hearts and souls are yearning for, and yet we spend a lot of time sort of going in the opposite direction. But it's hard to buck society. I mean, it's hard to buck what's going on, and you know, take a parent. You know, a poor parent is thinking maybe it'd be nice to walk with the kids on the beach, you know, in mid-December. But, you know, instead you're going to 15 rehearsals and 17 school plays and all this sort of thing. And sometimes you kind of miss it all. And I think we have to kind of draw the line. You know, somebody said I should call this take back
hold it
December.
There, because we have to break again. And I want to let everybody know that Winter Walk is filled with anecdotes and stories as well as great spiritual insights. When we come back, we're going to talk about my favorite story.
All right.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Jim Foster. The book today, A Winter Walk by Tolbert McCarroll, better known as Brother Joby, illustrated by Dorothy Beebe and published by Crossroad Books. There are many, many stories in here. There's a marvelous story of your experience at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, where the whole business, that the experience came to you there through the touching of the stones, the stones that had been there for so long, the stones that, you know, somehow brought peace. Yeah,
and you know, Jim, I've had a similar experience in many churches. I had a very similar experience in St. Bridget's on Van Ness, and which is why I would love to see that thing not be abandoned.
Yeah,
but you know, it just I think the thing that I mentioned also is that when one of our children died, and one of the other children said, we've got to get to a place where people pray, and we ended up in a church, and a mass was going on. I said, is this okay? She says, no, we got to wait till it stops.
Yeah.
Then in the quiet,
Yeah.
you kind of learn to say goodbye. And I learned then that the Western Wall and someplace in wherever really have the same qualities.
Well, let's go to Christmas Eve, 1939.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's everybody's favorite, right?
Yeah, you and the family are living where?
Oh, well, in Picayune, Mississippi, which was well named.
Sure, Picayune, Mississippi. Yeah, I'll bet. It sounds like you're in a witness protection program.
Right, exactly.
All right, and your father has a habit.
Well, he set off fireworks at Christmas, and he just on Christmas Eve he just loved to do it, and the thing that really topped it off was one of his fishing buddies had made this giant skyrocket, so he set it off and it didn't work. I mean, at first, then we thought it was going to blow up the backyard, which had a certain appeal to me at 8 years old. But instead, it slowly rose, and then it landed on a neighbor's roof where they were all inside listening to their new radio.
Yes, to the songs of one Nelson Eddy.
That's correct, and I very clearly remember that sound.
And the song he was singing was "Oh, Little Town of Bethlehem."
Right, and so. And then here the thing is, my father was a very slow, meticulous kind of person, so he walks slowly across there, knocks on the door. Well, it was, they were drinking a bit in there, and they come in and they invite him in, and we could see he couldn't tell them what was happening.
This is the funniest part of the story. He's going over there to tell them they've got a rocket on a roof that might explode.
Right.
All right? And they say, hey, come on in. Join the party.
So he goes in.
That's the way they do things in Picayune.
Yeah, right. And then a minute later, here they come roaring out, with carrying the new radio and everything. And in the meantime, the rocket has exploded, ignited the place, and then they start up and they start putting it out. Neighbors come and it was unquestionably the most exciting Christmas Eve. And my father became kind of the man of the hour,
Yeah. And
it was great, and it brought a couple of families together that hadn't been together, and this was literally just before the Second World War broke out in Europe, and everything was going to change. But I tell you, that Christmas Eve I will never forget.
Well, you have an even more amazing postscript to this story, I believe. You said, as you just mentioning, that this brought two families together. You and the McAfees, and that the next day, Christmas Day, I think you say, that you guys went over there so that you could listen to Nelson Eddy on this beautiful new radio, right. And your mother brought with her to share the most wonderful thing she ever makes at Christmas, fruitcake.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Now, I got to tell you in all honesty that Mr. B asked for the recipe. My mother gave her, let us say, 85% of the recipe.
Yeah, sure. That's what a good neighbor is all about.
Right.
She gave her 85%, though, so that McAfee's fruitcake would never equal your mother's fruitcake.
That's exactly right.
All right, and, you call this a book that brings people together, that makes them think and become vulnerable before the Lord, and your mother won't share her fruitcake recipe. The book is A Winter Walk. The author, Tolbert, brother Toby McCarroll, and it's published by Crossroad Books. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.